The moment the ticket gets handed back through the window. That's the moment most people think the stop is over. Documents returned, ticket or warning issued, the formal business concluded. You reach for the gear shift. You're already thinking about the rest of your drive. And then the officer is still there, still standing at your window, still talking. And what comes next, in the 30 seconds after most people think they're free, is actually where some of the most significant decisions in a traffic stop get made. Not during the stop, after it, or at least in the space where most drivers think the stop has ended, but it legally hasn't. Here's the thing that very few drivers understand about traffic stops, and it's the thing that makes this video different from every know your rights conversation you've probably seen. Most of that content focuses on the stop itself, the initial pullover, the document exchange, the consent request that comes while things are clearly still in progress. But there's a phase of the stop that most people walk right through without knowing it's happening. A phase where your rights are still fully in play, where the decisions you make still carry legal weight, and where the outcome can be substantially different depending on whether you know what's actually going on. It's the ending, or what feels like the ending. And this video is specifically about that. Let's establish the legal foundation clearly, because everything else depends on it. A traffic stop is what courts call a seizure, a brief detention justified by a specific reason. The legal basis for that detention is tied to the specific reason for the stop. The officer observed something. That observation justified the stop. The stop has a purpose. Here's the critical principle. The stop's legal duration is limited to the time it takes to complete the mission of the stop. Check the license and registration, run the plates, issue the citation or warning if warranted, and let the driver go. The Supreme Court addressed this directly in a 2015 case called Rodriguez v. United States. The ruling was clear. Extending a traffic stop beyond the time needed to address the reason for the stop, even by a few minutes, even for something relatively minor like waiting for a canine unit, requires independent reasonable suspicion of additional criminal activity. Without that additional justification, extending the stop is a Fourth Amendment violation. This is a genuinely significant ruling. It means that once the original purpose of your stop has been handled, the legal clock has effectively run out on that stop's justification. What comes after, any continued conversation, any request to search, any reason for you to stay, either needs a new legal basis or your voluntary participation. Most people stay, and most people keep talking, without realizing that the stop, in the legal sense, may have already ended. So when does a stop actually end? This is more nuanced than most people realize. It's not always a single clear moment. It depends on whether all the original business has been completed, license checked, registration verified, the stated reason for the stop addressed. When those things are done and your documents have been returned, that's generally when the original purpose has been fulfilled. After that point, if you're still there, you're either being detained on additional legal grounds or you're there voluntarily. And here's what makes this matter practically. An officer asking you questions after returning your documents isn't automatically extending your detention illegally. They can ask, you can answer or not answer. If they have independent reasonable suspicion of something additional, they may be able to justify a continued stop on those grounds. If they don't, and you keep talking because you thought you had to, the conversation you just had was voluntary. That distinction between what you were legally required to do and what you did is exactly what can be examined later if something gets complicated. The question most people never ask in that moment is the one that matters most. Am I free to go, officer? Said politely, genuinely. Once the original business seems completed, documents returned, ticket or warning in hand, that question requires a direct answer. Either you're free, in which case you thank them and leave, or you're being detained on additional grounds, in which case you've been told something important about what's actually happening. Most drivers never ask it, because the social momentum of the interaction doesn't include a natural pause for it, because leaving before the officer has walked back to their car feels presumptuous, because the impulse is to wait until you're clearly, unambiguously dismissed. You don't have to wait for dismissal. Once the stop's purpose has been addressed, you're generally free to go unless the officer has additional justification for keeping you. Knowing this changes how you navigate that final phase. Now let's talk about the types of searches that can happen during and after a traffic stop, with or without your consent, because understanding the legal landscape is what lets you respond appropriately to each one. Consent searches. We've covered these thoroughly in other videos. You can decline. Officer, I don't consent to searches. If a search proceeds after your clear non-consent, you state, I'm not consenting to this search, but I won't physically resist. Preserves the legal question for later. Probable cause searches. If an officer has genuinely established probable cause, something they've observed, something they can articulate and explain, a search can proceed without your consent. The existence of actual probable cause is a legal question examined by courts, not established by the officer's statement on the roadside. Your non-consent creates a record even in this scenario. Canine searches. A trained police dog alert can, in many jurisdictions and circumstances, establish probable cause for a vehicle search. The Rodriguez ruling established that waiting for a canine cannot extend an otherwise completed stop without independent justification. But if a canine is present during the legitimate duration of the stop and alerts, that's a different analysis. The specifics vary by jurisdiction. Searches incident to lawful arrest. If you're placed under arrest during a traffic stop, a search of your person and the area within your immediate reach can follow. This is a different category entirely, tied to a lawful arrest, not to the traffic stop itself. Inventory searches. This one catches people. If your vehicle is being impounded for a registration issue because you're being arrested for a variety of reasons, officers can conduct what's called an inventory search. This is technically not a Fourth Amendment search for evidence. It's an administrative process to document the vehicle's contents before impoundment. Courts have generally upheld these searches, and they can happen without a warrant and without your consent because they're categorized differently. The inventory search is the one most people have never heard of. It means that if your car gets towed from a stop, the contents may be documented in ways you didn't anticipate and didn't consent to. Let me spend a moment on the plain view doctrine, because this one operates entirely without any consent or request. If an officer lawfully present at your car window can see something in plain view, visible from their lawful vantage point without any searching, that observation doesn't require any additional justification. What they can see, they've seen, and what they've seen can contribute to their legal analysis of the situation. This is why keeping your car orderly and not having anything unusual visible has practical significance beyond tidiness. It's not about hiding things. It's about not creating observations that don't need to exist. Items in plain view can contribute to probable cause. Probable cause can justify a search. The chain flows from what's visible without any search at all. Practical toolkit. In order. During the stop, when documents are requested, provide them promptly. Narrate movement toward any compartment. My registration is in the glove box. Reaching for it now. When the consent question comes in any form, officer, I don't consent to searches. If a search proceeds anyway, I'm not consenting to this search, but I won't physically resist. When the original purpose of the stop seems completed, am I free to go, officer? If free, thank you, officer, and leave, promptly. If detained with additional justification, I understand. I'd like to speak with an attorney before answering any further questions. When activity questions come, where you're going, where you've been, I'd prefer not to answer questions about my activities. That's the sequence. The one that matters most, the one most people skip, is the fourth one, asking if you're free to go once the original business is done. Scenarios, because real situations branch. What if the officer walks back to their car, seems to be finishing up, and then walks back to your window again? This return visit is one of the more significant moments in a traffic stop. Something happened between when they left and when they came back. Maybe nothing, maybe they just forgot to say something, but it's worth paying attention. When they return, what are they asking? If the original purpose has been completed, documents returned, ticket or warning issued, and this is a new conversation about something new, the Rodriguez analysis applies. Am I free to go, officer? Is an appropriate, polite question. What if you're told you're free to go, and then an officer waves at you as you're leaving? Once you've been told you're free, you're free. A wave or a callback doesn't recreate a legal obligation to stay. You can say, I appreciate it, I need to get going, and go. What if there are two officers, one at your window and one at the rear of the car? Both are part of the same stop. Your non-consent applies to the whole vehicle from both directions. If the officer at the rear is moving toward the trunk while you're talking to the other one, officer, I don't consent to searches, said clearly enough for both. What if you're asked to step out of the vehicle? Officers can ask drivers to exit a vehicle during a lawful stop. Courts have established this. Comply. Step out calmly. Compliance with lawful orders doesn't change your position on consent to search. I don't consent to searches applies whether you're in the car or standing beside it. What if your car gets impounded at the conclusion of a stop? This is where the inventory search becomes relevant. If the car is being impounded and you'll be leaving without it, the inventory process may happen. There isn't much to be done about this in the moment beyond being cooperative, noting the inventory process is happening, and contacting an attorney promptly if there are concerns about what will be found or how the inventory will be conducted. What if it's late at night and the stop is in a poorly lit or isolated area? Hazards on. Slow visibly to show acknowledgement. Drive at reduced speed toward the nearest lit, populated area. Call 911 while moving. I've been pulled over and I'm driving to a lit area for safety before stopping. Communicate the intention rather than just driving. What if you received a warning rather than a ticket? Does the analysis change? No. The legal analysis of when the stop is concluded and what comes after is the same whether you received a warning or a citation. The ticket versus warning distinction doesn't change the Rodriguez framework or your rights around consent. Here's what I want you to carry away from this. Most people understand that they can decline a consent search during a stop. Fewer people understand what happens in the minutes after the stop seems to have ended, the post-completion phase where documents have been returned and the original purpose has been addressed. That phase is real. The rights that apply there are real. And the question, am I free to go, is the most important question most drivers have never asked on the side of a road. You now know it exists. You now know when to ask it. And you know what to do with both answers. Say it politely, mean it, leave when you can. Now here's what I keep thinking about after all these conversations about traffic stops and consent and what happens on the side of the road. We've been focused on what happens during and immediately after the stop, the real-time encounter, the in-person interaction. But what about what happens to information gathered from that stop, and others like it, after you've driven away? The data your car generates. The license plate reads log before you were ever pulled over. The patterns of movement that exist in systems you've never interacted with and don't know about. Because the stop is one moment, the data ecosystem around it is something else entirely. And what exists in that ecosystem, what's collected, how it's stored, what legal protections apply, is the part of this that most people haven't thought about. That's what we're covering next.